Welcome to Food Safety Now. My name is Brett Dooley, and I'm here joined with Nadia and Narine of Lumar Food Safety. She's a consultant, trainer, and auditor for food companies across the globe. Welcome, Nadia. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Perfect. Nadia, as well, as we know, we're doing our Board of Directors Spotlight right now. You're our Vice President for the OFPA, and been an active member for how many years?
Let's see here. Probably the last, so with the board for the last 4 or 5 years, and then when I was in industry, off and on over the last 10.
Perfect. Now, with Lumar Food Safety, you've started this business. What is it that you would like the people in Ontario in the food and beverage industry to know about your company?
Well, we focus primarily on GFSI. So we work with BRCGS and SQF, auditing, training, and consulting. So myself personally, I'm an approved auditor, trainer, and consultant. And anyone that works with me on my team, they're also approved in both standards. So we work with food, packaging, storage and distribution, agents and brokers. And if anyone in the industry is looking for training or consulting services or need like a pre-assessment or a gap assessment, those are the types of things that we do. So we're working with companies to help them get certified.
Perfect. And where can we find your information?
Oh, okay. So you can go to our website, www.lumarfoodsafetyservices.com.
Awesome. And they can get all that information there, and they can get in contact with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yep. Awesome. So you said, you were in industry before you created and saw the need for Lumar Food Safety. What did you do before?
So before starting the business about 6.5 years ago, I worked in certification. So I worked for SGS. I was their technical manager covering Canada. So the auditors reported into me. I made cert decisions on the audits, auditors on the field when they were submitted their reports. Of course, I was an auditor as well at training. And prior to that, I worked for a competitor. So I worked for SAI Global, another CB. Okay. I was their technical manager as well, but covering Canada, US, and Mexico. Just a larger geographical region. And kind of the same thing, working with the GFSI standards, unaccredited standards, auditing, training. The auditors reported into me. And then prior to that, I worked in industry. Okay. So I worked with Maple Leaf Foods, Canada Bread. Yep. So there's no more Canada Bread, but at that time,
we deal with Bimbo, so we know Bimbo very well. Yeah.
Yes, now they're Bimbo. Yeah. So I was there for about 15 years. I basically started off on the floor as a QA technician, and then was a HACCP coordinator. So I led HACCP implementation across about 10 facilities across Canada and the US. And then I moved to QA supervisor and then QA manager. And then my last role, I was in corporate, working with the supplier, an ingredient approval program. So at that time, there was about 40 something facilities, and there was like 3,000 suppliers. So it was a really good transition into certification. That was kind of, and I was also one of their lead internal auditors. So I was getting experience with auditing from there and supplier audits and all that kind of stuff. So it was a good transition into certification.
That's
and prior to that,
you've done a lot. Wow.
Yeah, and prior to that, I worked in dairy and confectionery a bit. So I worked at Cadbury Chocolate while I was in university and in my summers, and then after that, I was in dairy for a bit. So yeah, I've been in the industry for about pretty much. You know what? When I first started, I wasn't when I was leaving high school, I should say, I wasn't really thinking about food. To be honest, I was actually thinking medicine. I was thinking. So I was doing my undergrad in biology, and I was thinking, maybe like a family physician, but then I started, but maybe that's not the best thing for me, but I really still like sciences. Mm-hmm. So I started to look into, where what can I use with it? And it just kind of, my path changed a bit. Ironically, my mom actually worked in the food industry. She worked for Cadbury Chocolate, so that's
Oh,
why I got
okay.
the summer jobs there.
Yep.
But when I was there, I wasn't thinking about food. Even working there, I wasn't thinking about going into that industry at all. So yeah. So ever since, basically, that's where my path has been. I did at one point when I was at Canada Bread, I was thinking about marketing. Um, I ended up, I got a marketing degree, but I never really had an opportunity to use it because every time I would say, try to go down that path, everyone would be like, why would we use you there when you're so technically, inclined? And I was like, I guess. And so now that I have my own company, I finally have, could put it to use.
Well, I've seen your website. I'm very impressed. The presentation, everything looks spot on. It's definitely
Thank
current.
you.
So yeah, no, I was quite surprised. I've seen a lot of people's small business websites and stuff like that out there, and it looks like they got it off of GoDaddy, build your own or something, and you can tell that everything that
Right.
you have touched is extremely professional. Um,
Thank
and
you.
and you got a really good background, and you've done so much. And from where we started, it draws me right into my next question, which is a new graduate just starting out with all the wealth of information over the years and the experience that you've gained. What would be the one piece of information you would give them? What piece of advice would you give them for setting them up for success?
So for me, I think the best advice I can give anyone graduating is not to veer away from opportunity. So if something comes up and it doesn't seem like, what, I'm not quite sure, I would always say be open-minded, and because you never know where that path can take you. Because and that's for myself as well. Like when I was, if I had out right and just said, what, this is the path I want to go into,
Yep.
I probably would have never ventured out into food. And I absolutely love the industry, and and enjoy every minute of it. So I would just say, always be open to opportunities, even if it's not something that's directly, close to home. I would still say welcome the opportunity and entertain it.
I agree 100%. I've done a whole bunch of stuff in my background, and I've been thrown into jobs, and it's just figure it out because you gain more resources, you become more
Right.
valuable in an organization, and you just become more well-rounded in everything. So I agree 100%. If somebody says, Brett, can you do this? I always say yes. And then, like I said, if I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm doing, I figure it out and I'll work hard to make sure because, there's a lot of hours in a day. And so you still have time when you're at home
Right.
or anything to polish up and to make sure that when you're in front of those people or when you're doing that job that you're, executing. So yeah, I agree 100% actually. That's a really, really good piece of advice. Um, let's talk a little bit industry and what's been kind of going on recently. So I guess my one question is being in the food game so long here and working with so many companies, is there anything that you see as a trend or a new way of doing things that right now is fairly new, but you think it's either going to, stay for the course or just something that is, going on right now that's going to fade away? Obviously not pandemic related because once everything closes down, we think that the hygiene practices and the over the top stuff is going to obviously subside. But is there
Right.
anything trending that you've been noticing lately, or a lot of the times BRC's kind of got their flavor of the of the month or whatever it may be in some of these auditing scenarios that people are looking for. So it's one thing I know everybody's always on the lookout for, and you kind of got that inside know-how here.
So I would say, in terms of it was, I guess, pushed by the pandemic, but I think it is here to stay in terms of virtual. So I think
Okay.
now a lot of things related to virtual that we probably wouldn't have accepted in the past.
Yep.
I think we've entertained it, and
Yep.
we've seen that it can work. So, for example, training. Before the pandemic, I did a little bit of virtual training, not that much. Most people prefer, in person, face to face. But I think because we were forced into this virtual era, a lot of people, they went in, they did the training, and they recognized, what, it's not that bad. I mean, I think a lot of people still prefer in person, but if it came down to a decision, where they had the option of not taking a course at all or taking it virtually, I think they're more likely to now. So I think virtual training is definitely here to stay. Also auditing. So because of the pandemic, we had a lot of the GFSI standards had to introduce blended audits. So not the whole audit would be allowed to be done virtually, but we're allowed to review documentation, some documentation remotely, and now and then after that go into the facility to assess like GMPs and manufacturing practices. So that is definitely was triggered by the pandemic, but it is here to stay because now it's being incorporated into all standards.
Okay, awesome. And I would agree as well. I've never done so many virtual things before. It was unheard of. I've actually done service visits, which usually are considered on-site service virtually, where people are walking me through a plant and I'm viewing other people doing stuff. And you know what I mean? Like it's, yeah, totally different if they have
Yeah.
if they have internet reception. Some of these plants, it's very choppy. With the pandemic,
Right.
a lot of companies had to adjust, adapt, whatever. What was your biggest challenge? Would you say that COVID really had on your company?
You know what, honestly, and I think I'm just really lucky and blessed. We didn't really have any challenges, to be honest. Business has been steady and it's been good.
Yep.
Like I say, we were able to easily transition into virtual. Um, and because we're the food industry and people have to eat, there wasn't a slowdown necessarily in manufacturing. So things still continued. So really, for me, I wouldn't say there was really any challenges. We just had to maneuver and adjust into the virtual world. So we were doing more consulting virtually and the
Yep.
training versus before we would do more in person. But it really didn't have a negative impact. If anything, I think it was more positive because we were able to service clients more faster and quicker because of the virtual aspect. People don't have to fly out, to do a consulting service now or a training service. So I think if anything, it was a positive.
Perfect. Now, what about because if they're trying to show you something in their facility, virtual is not the same as obviously being right there. Did you find
Yes.
it harder to be able to grasp or to be able to, I guess, really hone in on what some of their issues were, or do you find your stuff's more documentation wise versus showing somebody
Yeah.
in?
So in terms of the facility aspect, in terms of the facility aspect, we definitely would go in for
Okay.
the on-site, looking at the process. But documentation wise, that's the stuff that we would focus on remotely,
Okay.
and training, because training you don't need to be necessarily physically there. But yeah, definitely when we had to go in to do, actually the facility aspect, we would go in. We would suit up and go into the sites.
Well, that's awesome because a lot of places we were like no visitors, complete shutdown. I know
It's
for
true.
myself, we were pretty much homebodies for a long time, it feels like. And
It's true.
yeah,
I think because we work with GFSI and certification, and a lot of these sites, they have to maintain their certification.
yeah,
Um, that's why it was viewed like in, I guess, the business's eyes, that, it was a need. And we had to go through tons of, temperature checks,
oh, of course.
wearing masks and face shields, all the whole thing, before we even got in, and all this screening. But I think that because we're linked with the GFSI certification, and we support that, pandemic or no pandemic, I think that helped.
Perfect. Last question for you.
All right.
Globalization,
Mhm.
obviously, as these times have come, we're all going farther, traveling everywhere. Everybody's coming from everywhere, sourcing things from everywhere. Do you think it has been added in a positive light to, I guess, the industry, or do you think it's prevented more challenges, more learning, and more more actual issues? How do you see that? And I think I know your answer because you got a great outlook.
Well, when you say globalization, are you referring to imports, or do you mean like with regards to the services that we provide?
I'm talking about everything on globalization. So that could be imports, that can be exports, that can just be communicating with people from another country as a supplier when they before would always be dealing local with people. The
Mhm.
world's just been opened up to so much. And so when you open something, you let a lot in.
Yeah,
However, you also let
right.
a lot of good stuff in. So do you see that it's made a huge impact in the positive note, or do you feel like it's
Um,
presented more challenges, more struggles, more issues? Where do you see that right now, or do you feel that it's kind of somewhere in a mix up because it could be a dog's breakfast depending how it's handled?
Yeah, no, I think globalization in general, I think it's a positive. I think it opens up a lot of, obviously it opens up more competition, but at the same time it opens up a lot more opportunity, right? Opportunity that and options. Options for someone who was across the world who maybe didn't have that option before because we're in Canada, but now that option is available. So I think it's a positive. There's others that might think the competition aspect of it is the deterrent, but I think overall, if I had to think about it, I think it's a positive. If I think about myself, just using training as an example, I've actually taught a class where I had someone in Ontario, California, Florida, Mexico, and in Europe all at the same time.
That's pretty
And
cool.
it was amazing. And the biggest amazing thing about it was obviously we all have different cultures and backgrounds. Even though we're in the food industry, we have different perspectives on things. And we were able to share all of that virtually. Like we were able to discuss it. And that was like, if it wasn't for globalization, let's just say that opportunity would never be there, and we would never be able to hear about different perspectives in different countries, how they do different things. So I think a a bonus, and I think it's a positive thing.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else you'd like to tell the audience before we sign off?
Well, since this is for the Ontario Food Protection Association, as the current vice president for 2021, we have two more events for the year. So we have the OFPA Social Networking Mixer, which is on September 16th, and we also have our fall meeting on November 18th. So I would encourage you to, check our website, follow our social media platforms, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter to stay up to date. We are making decisions about, whether it's going to be virtual or in person. I want to say that I feel like we're going to be in person, but I can't officially say that.
Here's hoping. Here's hoping.
Yes, we're
Yeah.
going to be hoping, and the board will be voting soon on on our next event, the September one, and then the fall event. But regardless if it's in person or virtual, I'd encourage you to check it out. We have some really great speakers for our fall event. Never really think that OFP has done. We're bringing GFSI speakers to Ontario for the Ontario market, as well as like a claims panel. So a lot of really good things going on. So I would encourage everyone to check out the website, and if you're not a member, to become a member.
Perfect. Fantastic. I couldn't have said it better myself because if you didn't add anything else, that was my next thing.
That was your next thing.
Because yeah, that was fantastic, and you did an awesome job. Actually, thank
Thank
you
you.
for that. No, that was fantastic. Well, Nadia, again, thanks for joining us today on Food Safety Now. We look forward to having you back, and always, like I said, for being a member and our vice president of the OFPA. Like I said, we may not be here today without your contributions and everything, so we do thank you for that. And yeah, we look forward to the next time we get to connect.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.